like to kick us off with a little thought exercise, just to get us in sort of the space of thinking about why pre-K matters. So would love to kick off by having you imagine a world where for the past 10 years, 80% of students have entered school kindergarten ready, and 80% of third graders have been reading on grade level. So if this is true, and this has been true for 10 years, and you're still on the leadership team at your school, what's different about your school because of this? And what do you think is different about the Lorain community as a whole because of this? So just take a minute just to think about it to yourself, and then when we do our introductions, we'll have a chance to share out one or two thoughts about that. So just take a second to think, jot down what you think would be different in your school and if your community if these things were true. So, some quick introductions. I gather that you all have met each other at the leader training that you've done before, but maybe not in depth. So if we could just do name, your role, the school that you're at, and one thing that you think would be different for your school and community if the scenario that we just talked through was true.
My name is Monique Stewart. I am the Dean of Scholars and Family Engagement at Stephen Arnold's.
Awesome.
And one thing I think will be different for the school community for sure, trust. We will rebuild in trust. And financially, I think people would obviously move back in the community because of that, because of the schools improving.
Yeah, so that reputation would increase.
Go away.
Yeah.
We'll build up.
Yeah, exactly.
Positive.
The positive reputation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Lindsay Swartz. I'm the Dean of Academics at Admiral King. And I was thinking about it, I guess, with teachers, so they could spend more time planning to go in depth rather than trying to plan always, how to catch everybody every year on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you focused on trust in the community and how that would be different, and how you hit on academically, teachers would just spend their time very differently because remediation would not be the number one goal.
Right. And I'm curious, what's your role? Is it the academic?
Yeah.
In the
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
You guys are already locked in. That's
funny.
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm Scott Peter. I'm the Director of Early Childhood Education for Lorain City Schools. And let's see, those are two really good ones, so let me think of a different one. I think we would just see, I'm trying to think, doing the math, it might be a little bit early, but if this were to continue, thinking about the graduating class of Lorain High School, if we were able to start them with a foundation where not only are they coming in kindergarten ready, but they are maintaining that through third grade, and we're not having to play catch up as much, thinking about what sort of stories would be in the paper and be told in the community about our graduating class and where they're headed, because they were started with such a strong foundation. And so for me, when I think about early childhood in this work, it's a lot. It's a very complicated world. It's a little messy. There's a lot that I'm still figuring out how it looks in this context, but even when things get a little bit tricky and we have to do some problem solving, when I keep these sorts of things in mind, it's what really drives me to yes, this matters, and if we pull this off, it's going to be amazing. So thank you guys for engaging in that little exercise with me. Let's talk through what we're going to do today. I'll start with something that's not even on here, but I think the key takeaway for me is for school leaders to feel comfortable going into pre-K classrooms and giving some positive, encouraging feedback in that first month, and sort of knowing what you're looking for in order to do that. That to me is the top goal, because pre-K can feel so different. I know it can feel like a whole new world sometimes when we're going into those classrooms. And so the idea today is not that you leave these 90 minutes like complete experts, or that you know exactly every little minute detail that you're looking for, or that you're even an expert in the curriculum. It's more like, all right, this is a foundation so that you feel comfortable giving some feedback to your teachers and starting to build that rapport. And then we have some support structures that will be in place over the next few months, where I will continue to come to your schools. We'll do some walkthroughs together. We'll have some additional tools. So we'll build on this, but this is really just, let's set the foundation. So specifically, we're going to internalize the tenets of the ECE vision of excellence, which I saw you guys leaping through before we got started, so you had a chance to look at it a little bit, and know what to look for in classrooms in the first month of the school year. You will understand your role in the development of ECE teachers. And then these two are in italics because in order to spend the most time in practice and really diving into the vision and what to look for in classrooms, I didn't want this to be a super information heavy session. So the really key things to know about the curriculum for pre-K and Ohio Step Up to Quality rating system are on one-pagers and some documents that I gave you. If we have time, we'll go through them really quickly. But I also have several office hours set up where if you look at those and you have some just clarifying questions, you can give me a call or come in and meet with me, and I can just answer those really quickly. This stuff is pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. Any questions or thoughts before we move on?
Just my biggest thing is just making sure that they feel connected to the rest of the school. So it's not like you're pre-K and then we're K-5.
Yeah.
Like that's my biggest, how do we make them all feel included?
Absolutely.
To build the school culture, yeah.
And I appreciate and I'm excited that that's on your mind, because when I was getting feedback from teachers at the end of last school year, that came up a lot. That was one of the things that came up the most, was like, we feel separate. We don't really feel like part of the school. And so that's one of the reasons for this focus on, let's just all get on the same page so that pre-K teachers feel involved, they feel like they're getting the same quality of feedback, that sort of thing. So I appreciate you doing that. Cool. All right, so we're going to talk just quickly, we're going to connect this back to the Lorain Promise and our commitment to early childhood. I heard you guys, again, call out in that first exercise, we talked a little bit about the academic implications, the opportunity implications, and the community and sort of trust and relationship building implications if we were able to have a thriving early childhood program. And that's ultimately why we are making this investment, why commitment to the Lorain Promise is invest in our early scholars. Is like, it opens up a whole new world of what you can do in grades 3 through 12 if you get pre-K through second right. And so that's ultimately the why for us. Just to reground ourselves in some more specifics, there is just so much research and data behind pre-K as such an important investment that any school district can make. You've probably heard a lot of it. Just the outcomes that are possible for students who go to pre-K are just very different, and so I'm looking at my notes to make sure I get some of these stats right. But just the way that research shows that preschool changes the game for kids, especially low-income kids. They're more likely to go to college, they're more likely to earn more, they're more likely to stay healthy when they grow up. And in terms of like the economic investment for a community, there's a Nobel laureate economist named James Heckman who does a lot of research in pre-K, and he has found that a community that invests in early childhood gets 7 to 10% return on investment, speaking economically, which is better than what you would get if you invested in the stock market. So like, it's just a really safe bet. It's obviously a long-term investment, which my hypothesis is that's why you see school districts a little bit maybe less willing to invest in it, because you don't get the same like immediate short-term returns that you would get investing in high school and stuff. But that's why I'm so excited that our district is really naming this as one of the top 5 things that we have to get right. Yeah. Anything that you guys would add or questions, reactions to that?
So the funding, it's the same funding dollars that our rest of our kids get? I'm sorry, I'm just curious.
No, that's a great question. So some of it does come from the general fund. We also have some additional sources. So Ohio has an early childhood education grant. So that's state funding. And there are some stipulations. That's one of the things that makes pre-K just a little complicated in terms of enrollment and those sorts of things is students who receive that funding have to meet certain criteria, mostly around income. But that is one large source of funding for pre-K. We have a lot of students in pre-K who are on IEPs, and so they receive preschool special education funding, which is federal money that we get. We have a partnership with Head Start, which is also federal money, so they give us some money. 8 of our pre-K classrooms in the district out of 20 have a Head Start assistant who's there and are part of this collaborative model that we have with Head Start, so we get funding there. And then we also get funding from the Stocker Foundation at Larkmore. So they fund that school specifically, and that grant is almost up, so we're looking into expanding that, which is exciting. But yeah, so there's multiple sources for that funding.
So like IEP meetings or 504s, will we still take care of that for pre-K? Like we would K-5?
Yes, you will have some support from, there is one of our, on the student services team, there's a team of school psychologists, and the preschool, there was one person who was overseeing all preschool who can support with some of the more preschool specific stuff in those IEP meetings, but they'll still happen like at the school level.
And there's still, school level meetings still have an administrator there, the parent support, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, that's a great question. And I will say, if you have more special education related questions that I can't answer, I partner with Doreen Morrell, who's over student services, and so I can always get an answer for you, because she does have more specialized knowledge in that area. But feel free to ask the question, because I may know, and if not, I can help you find an answer.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So what we're going to talk about now, quickly, is your role in developing pre-K teachers. And there's a slide on this later, but one thing I just have to name is some of this terminology can get confusing. So when I say pre-K, just talking about pre-K, obviously, that's 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds in our pre-K classrooms. There are 2 pre-K classrooms in every school, so 20 across the districts. When I say ECE or early childhood, that actually means in Lorain pre-K through 2nd grade. I am still working on, sometimes I use ECE and pre-K interchangeably. This session is really focused on pre-K because there are a lot of things that are unique to pre-K that don't necessarily apply to K through 2. But you should know that I am here to support on pre-K through 2. Pre-K is our #1 investment for all the reasons that I have said so far this year, but there are also ways that we are thinking about supporting you all in K through 2. They're just not the focus of this session. All right, so let's start with evaluation. So this is a question that comes up a lot. What does OTES look like for pre-K? And that OTES training is happening obviously later on this week. But in terms of pre-K, what school leaders will do is you will be responsible for conducting the OTES observation and evaluation for every pre-K teacher. What I will do to support you is I will join you on those pre-K OTES observations as a thought partner. So you will still be the observer. I will be there just sort of, if you have questions like, hey, what do you think about this thing that I'm seeing? What do you think about this piece of the curriculum, how it's being implemented, as a thought partner for you during the observation. And then when you are working on the evaluation, I will also be there as a thought partner for you there. So I am not the evaluator in that sense, or the observer, and we will communicate the implications of this very clearly for teachers. But it's really just part of what you said about wanting pre-K teachers to feel part of the school, just making sure that they feel like everyone is sort of bought into this culture of feedback, and that we're all sort of working together to make sure that we're growing our pre-K knowledge. So then this is just sort of reiterating what I just said, the STOP partnership, and then some additional ECE insight. Pre-K is not like an alien world. I mean, a lot of the things that you know, and you may have some experience with pre-K. I know I didn't ask that question, but you guys are going to bring most of it. I'm just there to add a little bit extra detail if you have questions and that sort of thing. Any questions about evaluation?
They will know that you are sharing in this collaboration with feedback
Yeah.
for OTES.
Yeah, so I'm not just going to pop in and then have no idea. They will know beforehand that like this is a support structure that we have for leaders. And the other thing that I'm going to say here, I don't have a clear answer on this yet, but as we're working through some of the step up to quality requirements, new pre-K staff are required to have a formal observation within the first month. Now, this is not going to happen within the first month, so that's going to be something separate from OTES. I'm talking with the state today and figuring out what exactly does that mean. Is there a different tool? That will likely be me if it's not OTES, and if it has to be in that first month, that will be me, but I will keep you posted on those sorts of things so that doesn't come as a total surprise.
What is Whetstone? Is that their evaluation tool?
Great question, so I will get to that in a second.
I'm sorry.
No, that's a perfect segue because you're about to get there.
Okay.
Coaching and feedback.
Talk
So,
too much.
I love the questions, please keep them coming. Observe pre-K teachers weekly and provide feedback via Whetstone. And so Whetstone is something that you are going to get training on once your training starts. It is a platform for providing feedback and like two-way communication between teachers and school leaders. So it's basically really the reason, and I won't give too much away, I don't want to steal the thunder, but one of the things that we found when we were doing some school walks last year was like there was no consistent method for school leaders to share feedback with teachers. So it was like Google spreadsheets and emails. And so this is just a way to establish some consistency. It's a pretty simple tool, and it's just a place where like you can load video on there, you can add comments, the teacher can respond to the comments. District leaders can use it as well to communicate with you and to communicate with the teachers. So it's really just a platform. Do you have questions or concerns about
So
it?
that's not, okay, so that's just not 3K, that's like
Yes,
everybody.
sorry, it's pre-K through 12.
Okay.
Yeah, so it won't be a specific platform that you have to learn, and you'll get trained on it, and I'm going to be trained on it too, so I don't have all the answers yet. We'll be learning side by side, but that's what I know about it, is that it's a platform just for feedback.
Okay.
And this is really supposed to say, especially at the beginning, bi-weekly. So like if you can get into every pre-K teacher, really whatever your cadence is for the rest of your teachers in your building, we just ask that pre-K is the same to your point before. So just making sure that you are regularly observing, whether that's weekly or bi-weekly, and providing feedback. And in this first month, that feedback is largely just going to be encouragement, positive feedback, to start to build that rapport. What I will do, I'm going to join you once a month, at least, for walkthroughs of pre-K classrooms. I'll also join you for K through 2, but again, since we're just talking about pre-K, focusing on that, and share feedback with you and directly with the teachers as well. So I will be using Whetstone also. In that first month of school, I will handle scheduling this with you, but I will go to every school and make sure that I am with school leaders on a walkthrough where we check out the pre-K classrooms and just do a quick pop-in. Nothing too formal yet, but just so you know that you're looking for that. What supports I will provide you, the early childhood education look-fors document, which is another document you have in your packet, the vision, and again, just like insight and coaching on early childhood. Any questions or thoughts about coaching and feedback? Cool. And then finally, professional development. So what leaders will do is include and differentiate for pre-K teachers in school-based PD. So when pre-K teachers are in your building for PD, we ask that they are included and that the pre-K is reasonably differentiated. We don't expect there to be a separate pre-K module for every single thing that you do, but if there is something that you're talking about that feels like this doesn't really fit, that you think about some ways to differentiate for the team. Hey, Jeff.
I'm so sorry.
No problem. Happy you're here. Crazy traffic this morning.
Oh my gosh, I thought I escaped it moving away from Northern Virginia, but not so.
No.
Thank you.
So right now, as we're talking about what is sort of expected of school leaders for the evaluation, coaching, and professional development of pre-K teachers, and then how you'll get support from me in the district.
Okay.
And I can catch you up on this stuff that we talked about before afterwards.
Thank you.
So that's what will happen at the school level. And if you need support in doing some of that differentiation, like, hey, we're leading this PD, I don't really know how much this applies to pre-K, that's what I'm here for, so just give me a call and I can help you think about that. What I will do, So this requires a little bit of context, but pre-K teachers have requirements through Ohio's 5-star pre-K rating system, which is called Step Up to Quality. One of those requirements is that they receive 20 hours of professional development each biennium. So it doesn't have to be exactly 10 hours a year, but that's obviously what it boils down to. It has to be approved professional development. Now, as a district, we can pretty much get anything that we do approved, but there are, just to illustrate, there are some like hoops that you have to jump through to meet this requirement and make sure that we're getting our 5-star ratings. And so what we are doing this year is, on those early release days on the calendar, it's the second Tuesday of every month, where teachers release early. That is going to be like professional collaboration and PD time for most of your teachers. That time, pre-K teachers are actually going to come with me, and we are going to do something that the tentative title is Pre-K Teaching Labs, and it's going to be sort of a time for us all to be together. It's going to be kind of like a giant TBT meeting. So they're going to be asked to bring some evidence, some student video, some student work. We're going to build it around a topic, one of the priorities from the ECE vision, which we'll get into in a second. And basically, they're going to reflect on their own practice. They're going to get feedback from their peers and from myself. We may bring in sort of an expert if we find that our teachers really need development in read-alouds, for instance. We might bring in somebody to do some modeling and coaching there. But we're trying to provide like PD that is meaningful, that isn't just random, sending them to some external vendor who's just going to tell them stuff that they already know. And it's really grounded in reflection and practice. And that is completely provided by me and the district. And so that is time that your pre-K teachers will be getting that. I'll be leaning in and asking you for thoughts on what you're seeing, obviously, to inform that, but that is something that we will handle directly. And they also are getting training on creative curriculum, which is the new pre-K curriculum, on the 15th and 16th of August. So that'll happen. They'll all be trained. That's teachers and paraprofessionals will be trained on the curriculum before the school year starts. And then what supports I will provide you. Direct teacher support, like when I'm doing those walkthroughs, I'll give them some feedback. Obviously, this professional development. And then, like I said before, consulting on how to include pre-K teachers in your PD if you feel like you need it. Okay, so that was a lot of info. Any questions, reactions, thoughts?
Like in years past, have the pre-K teachers been a part of the school-based PD, and so is that sort of new to
That's a good
them,
question.
or?
So they have both been a part of school PD, and there has been some differentiation like this. Basically, they had a pre-K PD day, and PD was scheduled with some local vendors. Often, what I've heard is often it was canceled. It felt a little haphazard, not super intentional. And so the structures themselves will be familiar. Like, yes, we stay at the school for some PD, and we have to get some that's sort of pre-K specific. But I think the rollout will feel different, and hopefully, I think is my guess. and we'll see what the feedback looks like. But yeah. Any thoughts, questions? Cool. All right. So let's move into the stuff that is less me talking. So we'll get into the vision of early childhood instruction. So why have a vision? Just like we would expect a teacher to have a vision for what we want to happen in their classroom, we believe that we need to have a shared destination and shared vision for what we expect to see in our early childhood classrooms. And I love this quote, "Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations," because for me, this is one of the most important reasons to set a vision, especially in Lorain with a lot of the narratives that are out there about our students, is let's put a stake in the ground and say that we believe that our kids are capable of amazing things. Even if other people are saying that that's not true, and let's prove it. So that, to me, is a big, important reason. But to get really specific, the purpose of this vision is to support teachers in planning and executing their lessons, to support school leaders in your coaching, feedback, and evaluations of pre-K teachers, and district leaders in their decision making and resource allocation. So making sure that the decisions that we are making about the program overall are aligned with this vision of where we want to go. And again, I'm catching myself doing the pre-K ECE thing, and I think that's the next slide. Yes. So, quick clarification of terms. Early childhood and ECE do not just mean pre-K. So, early childhood overall is birth through 8. Birth through about 2nd grade is how we think of it here. So that can break down into 2 categories. You have preschool, so birth through 5, so you have infants and toddlers, and we have some community partners like Help Me Grow, Early Intervention, Early Head Start that work with students this age. Then you have pre-K, which is what we're specifically talking about today. And so, preschool programs for ages 3 through 5. But then we also include school age K through 2 in our definition of early childhood. And so, Jess, I was sharing this a little bit before, but our vision is actually for birth through 2nd grade, and that is what our commitment is in the Lorain Promise. This session and our real intense priorities this year are around pre-K, but there are some plans this year and then more extensive over the next couple years for making sure that our K through 2 instruction is growing, so that, if we're making all this investment in our pre-K kids, when they get to K through 2, they're continuing to grow and learn. Cool. Alrighty. So we're about to watch a video. It's a lot of fun. Lots of cute kids in it. Of Miss Davis pre-kindergarten classroom. This is on the teaching channel. And as you watch the video, take notes on the following questions in your handout. So why is Ms. Davis' classroom a high-quality early learning environment? And why is this lesson a high-quality learning experience for students? And the reason we're starting with this before we dig into the vision is just, again, acknowledging, like I said before, you all are bringing a lot of experience and knowledge and expertise into this session, and so I want to make sure we're leaning on that. And so this will just give us a chance to sort of ground ourselves in what we would look for in a pre-K classroom, and then we'll add the vision onto that.
Bippity boppity bumblebee, can you say your name for me? Kylo, let's clap it. Kylo, let's snap it. Kylo, let's stomp it. Kylo. I teach at First Place to Start Child Care Center, and we have ages 4 and 5-year-olds. And our read aloud today, we read the story Joseph Had a Little Overcoat. We chose that book because it added to our clothing theme, but it also expanded their vocabulary on different kinds of clothing. Who is this? Remember, who is that? Remember his name? Starts with the J. Joseph. All right. And he has a bunch of friends on there. Who are his friends? All the animals are on there.
That's a chicken.
A chicken. What's that one? A cow. And look, all of his friends here. What are they doing?
He's singing.
Singing, exactly. He's singing. So Joseph had a little overcoat. It was old and worn. And what was worn? What did we say? Talk about worn. Worn is
It's getting old.
it's getting old. So we chose that book because they were able to repeat parts of the story over and over again, and they were able to use that repetition to expand their vocabulary. Joseph had a little necktie. It got old and worn. And then Joseph had a little button. One day, he lost it. Yes, go on.
And then he made a story of it.
You remember so well. And what is he doing? he's looking for it. And, wow, is he looking very, very hard for that? Because he's done what?
And he's moving the stuff away. And there's a hole on his wand.
A hole?
It's right there on this wand.
Come show me.
Like,
When we're reading stories to them, they're able to be a bit more creative. So it's something that comes from reading aloud because he comprehended, he understood the story, but he was able to take it a step further. Okay, I like that story too. And you know what? I brought some coats, and so we can see what the vest looked like and what the overcoat looks like. Who wants to try on the overcoat that Joseph had?
me?
Okay, how about Grecia? We gave them a chance to act out the story, so each child was able to put on one of those types of clothing, so they were able to gain a lot more comprehension. I need, Jaden, you come and hold the book, and we'll go back to the pages and see. Thank you, Jaden. We did have one little boy that we had to sit and turn the pages, which is also very important to children in reading aloud. And you can hold it better. After you had the jacket, then it became a what? A vest. So after it was a jacket, it became a vest. What's missing off of the vest that was on the jacket? What are these things here? Sleeves. So who knows what it's going to become next? What? What is it going to be? A scarf. Let's turn the page and let's see. There it is. What is it? A scarf. Allowing the children to become a part of the story helps them to understand, and that's what reading aloud is all about. Jacket, and then it becomes a vest, and then a scarf, and then a tie, and then a handkerchief, and then a button. Yay!
Awesome. So, just would love to hear.
Green color in the leaves to help them to absorb.
Active read aloud is when you, as the teacher, have pre-planned exactly what piece of the text you're going to use, and you have a specific teaching point that you're looking for. So you model for the students how you are taking information, and then you give them an opportunity to try that on.
Alright, sorry about that. Okay, so we'd love to hear your thoughts about what made that a high quality early learning environment, what made it a high quality early learning experience for Miss Davis's kids.
Had high expectations.
Yeah.
And she like allowed various levels of work. She was meeting them where they were. They even kind of did that for her.
Yeah,
So she kind of was forced to do that, which is what we want.
absolutely.
More student centered.
Were there specific moments where you were like, where you mentioned high expectations, where you saw like something that made you think like, yeah, like that's a high expectation for a preschool student.
Like vocabulary,
Yeah,
where she had the various types of clothing samples marked. But she used corduroy, words like that, big words.
yep, absolutely. So vocabulary, it was one example that we saw of high expectations. What else?
So let's say for the environment, there were a bunch of tactile experiences like around the classroom, like
Yeah.
the examples of the different fabrics, and then all the clothes that she brought in. Everything was it was like mini, like on a kid level, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, even she was sitting on a tiny little chair. She wasn't kind of like holding over them with this book.
Yeah.
And then it did seem like everything that was in her classroom that we could see was intentional. So it was all tied around the same. I mean, not necessarily the story, but like the same kind of theme.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, sort of an integrated environment where you can tell that she's really put thought into every experience they have is connected in some way, And then I also heard just the environment having a lot of tactile hands-on experiences for kids to have. Absolutely. Anything you would add, Jen?
The other thing that I noted were the structures and the routines, and that like the kids knew how to come to the rug, and they started with some like name syllable kind of practice that before they got into the read aloud, and just that there were lots of opportunities for the kids to engage and use academic language and to reinforce the vocabulary and comprehension of the story.
Absolutely. So these are great. So I think the things that you're calling out are a lot of things that you're going to see represented in our vision of excellence. Things like developmentally appropriate, yet still intellectually stimulating. Things like that integrated environment, a classroom environment that students have a chance to own and sort of feel ownership and leadership over. Some of the social emotional pieces. So we will get to that now. I'm going to do a just very quick narration for the sake of time over how this vision of excellence came to be, just so you know sort of where it came from. When we started, there was really nothing like this in the district. And so we have very good pre-K teachers. When we did our walkthroughs, there's a lot of excellent things happening in pre-K classrooms. A lot of them have been here for a long time. They love what they do. They are very invested in the kids and in having a great program. One of the things I heard from a teacher that stood out to me the most was one of our teachers who has been here for like 20 years said, you know, Lorain's early childhood program used to be the excellent pre-K program in the area, and now it's not, and I want to get it back there. And to hear like that investment and the sense of possibility, I think in that, I think was really inspiring to me. So all that to say, lots of good things happening, not a lot of consistency. So that's why this vision came to be. It was informed by school visits where we saw almost every pre-K classroom and some kindergarten and first grade classrooms as well, where we talked to pre-K teachers. We had a focus group and a ton of them came out, which again I think is a sign of investment. And we talked to some school leaders as well. Like I said, we observed a bunch of classrooms and then got teachers and stakeholders early input on what they would want to see in this vision of excellence, leaning on their expertise, drafted it, synthesized it into this vision document, and from there it went through several rounds of revisions where we showed it to teachers again, we showed it to school leaders, we showed it to different early childhood leaders across the country. The director of ECE in Denver looked at it for us. Someone from DC looked at it for us. Some local districts looked at it for us. So feeling really good about this draft. It's not final forever, but for this year we feel like this is a good starting place, and we can revisit next year and see if there are things that we want to change. But just so you have a sense of how this document was created. So let's dig in. So it's this document that says LCS Vision of Excellence in Early Childhood Education on the front. It's not the prettiest formatting yet, but the content is there, I think. So at the heart of this vision is, you'll see this on the second page, is 4 key tenets. And these are the headlines of what we expect to see happening in early childhood classrooms. And I am using that correctly this time. We would want to see these things happening pre-K through second. We have gotten some feedback from K through 2 teachers that they don't see how it's feasible for their grade levels given some other expectations. So that's something that we'll have to work on and continue to get feedback on. But thinking about it from a pre-K lens today, the 4 key tenets are up here, and I would love if we could just popcorn out, if you guys could just read, if volunteers could just read the headline of the tenet and then the description, just so that we can sort of get started with that. So anybody can start with number 1.
You want us to read?
Yeah, just read the whole paragraph.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Scholars engage in developmentally appropriate, intellectually stimulating work. Research indicates that all children benefit from exposure to advanced content, including our youngest learners. Effective early learning classrooms create opportunities for young children to engage with complex academic work in all content areas, including language and literacy, mathematics, social studies, and science. At the same time, teachers must operate with a deep knowledge of developmentally appropriate practice, and they must tailor their instruction to the needs and zone of proximal development of each individual scholar.
Awesome.
Scholars have regular opportunities to practice and develop their social, emotional, and problem-solving skills. Scholars need more than just academic proficiency to succeed in school and in their future careers. Emotional intelligence, executive function, problem-solving skills, and teamwork are all critical for success in 21st century jobs. We need to make sure our youngest scholars develop in these areas, not only so that they can excel academically, but also because these are traits that will help them be engaged and responsible classmates and citizens in their schools and communities. Teachers will provide deliberate instruction that supports students in developing these skills, integrate these skills into play and child-led activities, and leverage opportunities that arise in the classroom to foster them.
Thank you.
So scholars shape their learning environment. An early childhood classroom is not just a space where learning happens, it is a teacher unto itself. The classroom should be responsive to scholars' needs and interests, and it should be reflective of who they are, both culturally and creatively. Scholars should see, Scholars should see their work and progress documented on the walls. They should be responsible for labeling objects and spaces, and they should be surrounded by things to manipulate, like science projects, building materials, and more. They should have the opportunity to lead in their classrooms, and their voices should be welcomed and celebrated.
I'll read the last one.
Okay.
Scholars are providing an integrated, cohesive, and joyful classroom experience. Effective early learning classrooms take a holistic approach to child development. Teachers in these classrooms understand that children's learning and development in one domain has an impact on all other domains, and they design a classroom experience that allows students to explore these connections. These teachers integrate a variety of learning approaches, including small group instruction, meaningful play, learning centers, etc., and they prioritize cultivating a joyful and safe environment. So, on the next slide, we're going to have a chance to dig into each one of these. We'll do that with the jigsaw format, so we are going to get a little bit more detailed, but do you have any questions about sort of the general tenets and what we just covered? Cool. And if you have questions about specific ones, you will have the chance to get into some of that. So, given that there are only 3 of you, what we're going to do is we'll do one together to sort of give us a sense of the kind of things that we would be looking for, and then each of you will take one of the 3 remaining ones and sort of dig into that. So what we're going to do during this time is basically try to synthesize what we take away from each of these tenets, and then respond to some of these questions that I think help think about them in a realistic and practical way. So first, just thinking about, okay, so what does this tenet actually mean? What examples of this tenet did we see in that video to sort of apply it to real life? And then just getting your thoughts on what parts of this tenet are you excited to see in your classrooms, or do you want to learn more about in your classrooms this year? So we will do developmentally appropriate, intellectually stimulating work. So while I'm writing that, what you can do is take about 5 minutes just to read on the next page in your vision. There are student and teacher actions organized by each of the tenets. So just read over the student and teacher actions just for this one, developmentally appropriate, intellectually stimulating work, and think about these sort of guiding questions as you're doing that, and then we'll come back together and do this together. Starting with just what does this mean for teachers and kids? Feel free to shout out what you think. And it doesn't have to be a perfectly formed thought, just we can gather some ideas of when you think about what this really means for teachers and kids.
Student ownership.
Student ownership. So I think that's a great one. I have a follow-up question. So there's another tenet about scholars. When I think about student ownership, and I know we haven't read this one in detail yet, I think about students shaping their learning environment, but I also see the argument for it living here. So where do you see student ownership living in this tenet?
Where I see it living.
Yeah, like what were the pieces that you read that made you think like, yeah, like what I really am looking for here is that students will own it.
Lost it. Like for example, they have to use evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't just, I think the duck swam across the lake, or the duck swam across the lake, but where do you see that, understanding the flow of the book and being able to go back and cite that, it's a big thing anyway, in the other grades.
Absolutely. And there was an example of that, and I know this is one of our other questions, but when, in Ms. Davis's classroom, when the student said something, and she's like, come up here and show me where you see that. Like, I think that's a great example. She's giving him a chance to own that and express his understanding and show evidence, and actually physically getting up and having to show the class. So yeah, I think that's a great example. So student ownership, especially academic ownership, they're doing the thinking. What else do you think this means for teachers and kids?
Thinking on that teacher side is really planning thoughtfully around building those foundational skills in reading and math in particular, and finding engaging, developmentally appropriate ways to extend that learning too.
Yeah.
When I think of this, I think a lot about, like in the preschool classroom, the goal is both academic, but then also pairing that with how can kids understand the world that's their immediate surroundings.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
it seems like that there's a lot of that needing to happen sort of structurally on the teacher end, and then providing kids like many opportunities to interact with the different themes in both of those ways.
Yeah.
I think it's unfortunate that we don't carry the concept of like creative play and centers. Like obviously it would have to be a higher level, but 9th grade students like picture books, and there's a lot that you can do with a picture book to support your lessons. And I think it's unfortunate. I'm hoping that we will do more of that as we continue this work, because they enjoy incentives and they enjoy working with manipulatives, and just like the preschoolers do.
I agree. I think there's a lot we can learn from pre-K. And to build on, I think, all those points, I think for me what this really means for the teacher is never lowering expectations, but finding ways for students, whether they're 3 and they just started pre-K or they're about to go to kindergarten, to access the content and the skills in the real world environment in ways that are meaningful for them. So like, one thing that I will just throw out there that we have gotten a lot of feedback from a few teachers on is like, anything we do, is it developmentally appropriate enough? And the thing that I always push back on is, what do we mean by that? Because developmentally appropriate, I think, can be code for lowered expectations, and it doesn't mean that we make it easier. It doesn't mean that we make it easier for kids on IEPs. It doesn't mean that we make it easier for preschoolers. We just think about what is the method and what are the ways that I'm supporting you to access this stuff. Within reason, obviously, not teaching them calculus or whatever. But though I did see a kindergarten teacher in our district teach 3rd grade standards and all of her students had them mastered. It was one of the most amazing lessons I've ever seen. So I like leaning into the high expectations. But yeah, I think like the other theme was just, you gotta be so intentional and thoughtful about the way that you plan as a pre-K teacher, because there are so many pieces that have to be present individually, but they all also have to work together. So yeah, I think you guys are right on. Any other examples of how you saw some specific student and teacher actions here live out in Ms. Davis's classroom?
I think definitely she anchored the activities with authentic text and then planned for hands-on activities to connect to that.
Yeah.
And I think you already touched on it, but she did definitely with the book.
Yeah.
And he was trying to say something and she let him come up and point and
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw routine and purposeful opportunities to build reading fluency and foundational reading skills too,
Yeah.
and like clapping, tapping, stomping names, and allowing the student to come up and turn the pages of the book to support reading skills.
Yeah. That was a pretty text-rich environment too. We only saw the environment sort of in flashes, but like I saw a lot of language up and around the room, and even with the fabrics that she had labeled. So I thought she had done a good job creating a text-rich environment. Our teachers do a pretty good job with this one too. Cool. So for the sake of time, I do want to get your thoughts on the last question, which is, what parts of this tenet are you most excited to see? And when you think about going into classrooms at your school, what would you really love to see teachers doing?
I was really excited about the ideas of problem solving and persevering in problem solving, and how, I think that's something that we work really hard to foster throughout elementary school and into middle and high school, and to see the foundation of that in preschool will be really awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
I agree. I'm excited to see like the push for a conceptual understanding of like these complex math problems, even when they're 3 and 4.
This curriculum does a pretty good job of that too, so I'm excited for that as well. Awesome. Anything to that?
Yeah, I would say, I know it's in here some way, somehow, just, being able to constantly assess them, being able to know how to adjust your assessments based on how they're doing, instead of just teaching holistically, like making sure that they're differentiating.
Yeah.
To make sure they don't miss those important concepts
Yeah.
as they go through the grade levels.
Yeah.
Because, my own son, he's going to the 7th, and he's doing phenomenal in reading, but somewhere in math, he missed some pieces and parts, and now we're playing catch up at Guman. So, making sure we don't miss those nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Cool. So I think this is a pretty good synthesis of this tenet. So what we're gonna do now is, you guys are gonna have some time to do this for one of the tenets. You'll have a few minutes to read the actions, then I'll give each of you a poster so that you can just capture your thoughts on what does it mean for teachers and kids, any examples you saw in the video, and then what are you excited for. And then we'll just quickly share these out with the group before we move on to what we're going to look for specifically in classrooms in this first one. So, any volunteers for specific tenets? Anybody really jazzed about taking on one of them?
Also have the problem solving.
Awesome.
And I'll do the joyful classroom experience.
Cool. So you're cool with shaping learning environment? Awesome. So we'll do again just what we just did. Take about Take about 6 or 7 minutes. If you need more time, we can adjust, and then we'll quickly share and then move on to the next one.
I can do it. A minute. Okay, so I was looking at the integrated, cohesive, joyful classroom tenet, and it really means a nurturing environment where scholars are engaged in purposeful play and teachers are providing many different opportunities and approaches for learning, and just the idea that scholars are and teachers are joyful in the classroom. We saw that in Miss Davis's video through her interactive read aloud, where kids were reading along to familiar parts and acting out the story to retell it, and adding movements to the routine like clapping and stomping names. She also sang at the beginning. She sang a song to signal the transition, which was very cute and joyful. And I'm just excited to see joyful learners and joyful teachers in the classroom, and the idea that we're fostering a love of learning in our youngest scholars from the very first time they set foot in a classroom.
Wow.
How much time do I have left?
That was impressive. Yeah. Cool, thank you, Jess. This one.
Okay, so the scholars have regular opportunities to practice and develop their social, emotional, and problem-solving skills. So what I think this means is that the teacher plans to explicitly and implicitly teach and model self-regulation during the school day. Attention is paid to students being able to name, understand, and respond appropriately to their own emotions and the emotions of others. And then students should have multiple opportunities to engage with others in accordance to the established community norms. So like an emphasis on developing social skills. And I saw this in Mrs. Davis's class of turn taking. I mean, the kids, for preschool, that's hard. And so, they were, three would raise their hand, she would call on one, and nobody, got upset. They'd put their hands down and wait until the next turn. The carpet procedures, and then half of some discussion I actually did notice. When one child would talk, the others would look and listen, and that's something that I'm sure she had to put some effort into teaching. We didn't get to see this, but it did seem in the background that there were small groups who were engaging differently. So she had those 4 or 5 kids, and then others were moving around. And I'm excited for the attention to training executive function and also social skills.
Awesome. Perfect. Very impressive as well. Very concise. At the same time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the tenet that I have was scholarship and learning environments. I kept this pretty simple, but things that stood out to me, engaging, leading in a classroom, the student being able to do that, interacting with the manipulatives, providing and receiving feedback to and from their peers, because it's a lot of socialization in pre-K. With Davis, I'm sure, even though we didn't see her documenting what they were doing, there had to be an informal assessment going on that she has to go back to. So I kind of picked out things that, I don't know, I just felt from the culture of the room that these must be things that are happening, like respecting the culture of her classroom. She had, Hispanics in there, she had African American students in there, and I really feel that there may be even a family participation going on in there, so that it's like a partnership. And then I just put here that progress is formed through shared partnerships between child, home, and school.
Awesome. And I love how you sort of inferred, here's some of the things that were probably taking place based on that.
And that's part of OTES, the behind the scenes part.
Cool. So again, the purpose of this section was not that you leave with the vision memorized or feeling like you're a total expert, but that you have some foundation around the tenets and what this would look like in the classroom, and I think you guys will do a really awesome job of that.
Can I get one more packet for me? I stole one.
Yes,
just
I will
need
give you
one
one more.
That's a good idea.
Okay, Okay, so I'm going to move through this pretty quickly, but from that vision, we clearly don't expect that at the end of next year that we're going to be able to say we did it all. We know that we have to chunk it and prioritize, and so through looking at data and observations and some different things, we came up with these goals, which you have in your handout. So these are the things that we are specifically looking for in pre-K classrooms this year. And these are aligned with sort of the district-wide goals of pre-K through 12 as well. So we all know that standards aligned lessons is one of our big pushes. We want to see that in pre-K too. We want to see kids engaging meaningfully with a variety of texts throughout the day. We want to see scholars engage in oral language and vocabulary development. And we want to see that scholars will demonstrate joy and pride in their work. So the social emotional piece. So these are the things that we are really focusing on for this year. We would want to see everything in the vision, obviously, but these are the things that our professional development is going to be structured around, that we'll be coaching mostly around. Yes, any questions or reactions? Cool. So the look fors document that you have is essentially designed to be kind of a cheat sheet when you are in a pre-K classroom to give you a sense of, in these first few weeks, what are some tangible things that I want to see that I can provide some feedback around for my teachers to make sure that they're on track, like when you and I are having conversations. So we've got the goals right there on the front, and then it's broken into weeks 1 and 2, and weeks 3 and 4. So what we're going to dig into for this session is really weeks 1 and 2. And I'm going to give you a second just to, shouldn't say second, I should tell you exactly how long, about 4 to 5 minutes to look through weeks 1 and 2. You'll see these are grouped by tenet from the vision, and it gives you some things to consider as you observe. But really just pay most attention to the bold parts and just to get a sense of what are things that you're going to be looking for in pre-K classrooms in those first couple weeks. And then we'll actually have a chance to watch another video and quickly give you a chance to try and pull out some of those things to give you a little bit of practice before we wrap up. So take about 4 or 5 minutes to read just the weeks 1 and 2 sections. You can look up when you're done so I know that we can move to the video, and then we'll practice. A couple minutes of this video, and as you're watching, pretend that it's the second week of school. You're walking into a pre-K classroom in your school for the first time. This is what you see. And think about using the look fors to think about some feedback that you would share with your teacher.
See that all the trees. So can we build some trees for our aunt? Oh, you want to see them? See how happy they are with the trees? See how happy they are. He's just kind of sad, right? And that's what Lorain came yesterday. So this is anything you like. So can we build some trees for our animals? Okay, let's build some trees for our animals. What do you think we should do? Which shape?
in camera work, so we didn't get to see Mark's environment. But curious, thinking about these look-fors, what are some things that you noticed?
A lot of questioning, a lot of probing.
Mm-hmm.
She gave them a book, she gave them a little bit of background, and gauged what her thinking was based on that. Front loading what she gave them.
Yep.
Was that one of our teachers?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I mean, the activity that we saw them doing is purposeful,
Mm-hmm.
definitely tied to the book.
So I guess back to that intentionality we were talking about before. I think the first thing I noticed was the amount of time that she spent talking with these students and like pushing in some tier 2 vocabulary, and also, like you said, asking open-ended questions to give them a chance to use some of that vocabulary themselves. And so I think that is something, knowing that that's one of our goals and that that's in here, that I might give some positive feedback around is, we were sitting there for a couple minutes just talking, really taking, it seems intentionally doing some oral language development there in the center, and so that really stood out to me.
she was pushing out as many standards as she could.
Mhm.
Broke it in half, you were from 1 to 2, good job. Next.
Yeah.
But she got it in there.
Yeah.
She used a lot of reinforcing language to praise their like positive actions and the way that they were sharing and the way that they were using the materials and making connections from the materials to the book.
Yeah. So maybe trying to build some of that pride that we talk about. Yeah. And then the book was brought up, but I also think about the way that she brought the text, went back to the text and brought it in during Zeners, and made that connection. And sort of connected to this first tenet around complex texts are used to help scholars orient sort of school routines, express emotions, and learn content. So saw a little bit of that as well. Anything that, and again, if this is your first visit, you're probably not giving a lot of super constructive feedback. But if you were going to mark down something that you would want to look for again, based on something that is concerning or you would see as an area for growth, anything stand out there?
I was thinking maybe about looking for how she's taught routines, like specifically around how to get the teacher's attention when the teacher's working with another group, or how to ask for help. If that's what, I guess Kayla was asking if you could go to a different center, so a routine for that.
I
Absolutely.
was thinking the exact same thing. I mean, and then the one just kind of like wandered in, and she's like, "Oh, do you want to come with us?" It seems like maybe there should be a way. I mean, I don't know, like time. Maybe we're gonna be here for 10 minutes, and necessarily.
That's a great call, I think. So knowing that you both pulled out the same thing, if that was one realization you had from observing, what might you do with that information or that observation?
I think I'd either come in at a time I knew I might see some transitions or might see kids in the center to observe again, and also talk to the teacher about what her routines are, what it would look like if it was done perfectly, that routine, and what maybe I had observed, and then we might script that routine again and do some practice, and then look for it in the classroom in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if you thought about like, what's a time of day that I can come back and maybe see some more explicit instruction on those routines, and then depending on what you see there, think about what a coaching plan or feedback might be. Cool. All right, for the sake of time, we're going to move, but hopefully that just gave you some quick sort of practice using this as a tool. There are weeks 3 and 4 in here as well. They really just build on what's in weeks 1 and 2. So you can look those over after the session as you're getting prepared for the school year. Obviously you have a little bit more time before weeks 3 and 4, but it's the same idea. in alignment with the same stuff.
I feel like this is really, really helpful. It's very explicit,
Yeah.
it's clear to know exactly what we should be seeing, and the timeline especially, I feel like is helpful to me because I don't feel like I have a great context for what it looks like week 1 and 2 in preschool, so this is very helpful.
Good to hear. And the other thing I'll say about this tool is it's partially a placeholder for us to develop a more robust rubric aligned to the vision that we'll be able to share and sort of support you on after that first month. So this is like, what's the stuff you look for right at the beginning, and then we'll have a tool that's a little bit more robust and comprehensive moving forward. Okay, so a couple quick things I want to cover in these last couple minutes.
Well, could I ask really quickly, is that idea that like it will kind of become like a scope and sequence for our teachers and for us, similar to like what we have as a resource in Get Better Faster?
Yes, I do think that that's a similar way to think about it. I think there's still some, as we're developing the rubric, thought that has to be done around how does it connect with the curriculum and the resources that are in there to support teachers. But yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. Okay, so leaving this session, so the directive that we sort of gave to school leaders was there should be one member of your leadership team that comes to this session. So what you can do going back to your team is, and this is all in your handout, but one thing would be, we do have one more of these sessions left next Friday the 10th. So if you have someone on your team that you think would really benefit from coming to the session, you can encourage them to come. Otherwise, we ask that you just schedule some time to sit down with them and go over the basics of what we talked about today. We will make sure that everybody has a virtual copy of the vision and the look for, so you don't actually have to make them copies or anything like that, but just making sure that you have a chance to talk with your team and make sure everybody's on the same page about pre-K. I do have some office hours set up, the dates of which I will email out to you later today. And that's time you can either come in or call me, and you can use that if you just have clarifying questions, if you want to do some additional practice, anything like that. If you have suggestions or concerns that you feel like aren't being addressed yet, that's a good time for that. And in terms of Step Up to Quality and Creative Curriculum, in your packet you have a one-pager that I created that explains the context of each of these things in our district, that answers some frequently asked questions, and then a resource from, like, one covers the Step Up to Quality requirements, and one covers just the basic tools that are in the creative curriculum. Bless you. And those will just give you a little bit more context. These are things that are largely being handled at the district level, and so our teachers are going to be trained, I'm going to be trained, so you don't have to have a very in-depth knowledge of creative curriculum, but that document should give you some background, just to know what you're sort of looking for. Let's see. I think that's it. Any questions that you guys have before we close out? Cool. So in terms of what's going to happen next, once we get the school year started, I'll reach out beforehand, but I'll schedule a time for me to come and walk through with whoever on the school leadership team is going to be doing those walkthroughs. We can walk through together with the look-fors, and I can give you, thank you, if you guys just want to leave the exit tickets there as you walk out. I will walk through the classrooms with you and just see if you need any support using the look-fors. But other than that, you can expect to just continue receiving information with me as more details come out. The one thing I'll say about this, the Step Up to Quality, is we've gotten some information since I created the handout that I gave you guys. So I don't know what I did with my copy, but the handout that has like the room for notes and stuff from the session. If you look at the next steps on the back of that, there's one at the top that says find out who the Step Up to Quality teacher is or something like that in your building. You can get rid of that because on your Step Up to Quality handout, I actually differentiated what you need to do by school. So that's, you can get rid of the one that talks about find out who the Step Up to Quality administrator is at your school. I'll tell you exactly what it says. It's in before the school year begins. Identify which teacher is responsible. You can actually just cross that out. Okay, I know I got a little rush there in the end, but thank you guys for coming on the second to last day of July. I'll hang out for a few minutes if you have any questions that you want to talk about specifically. But enjoy the rest of your weekend. Excited to see you all more soon.